Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight to this general meeting of the New York Technology Council. We've got a great program tonight with a great panel, so I'm not going to spend too much time up here, but I would like to make a few remarks about the council and let you know about some of the programs and opportunities that we have upcoming in the future. Real quick, I'd like to thank our 2011 sponsors for continuing on with us: Information Builders, Verizon, Google, TGP Associates, Triana, RRE Ventures, and the accounting firm of Eisner Amper. For those of you that are in the audience, thank you for your generosity. We really appreciate your involvement in the council, and we hope to be able to serve the community well in 2011. So thank you. Also want to give a special thanks, of course, to our host tonight, Microsoft. We appreciate the venue and the use of the facility. As usual, Microsoft has been very generous to us as well, so we hope to be able to continue that relationship. I'd like to turn the evening over to Sreenivasan, who's going to moderate our panel tonight. We'll just take 1 second to configure the panel, and I'll turn it over to Sree, and he'll take it from there.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to come back to the Tech Council. I had the opportunity to be on a panel last year, and Don was very kind to invite me back. And I think he made sure I was not a speaker so that I wouldn't talk too much. So, I believe in all things in moderation, including moderation. So my job today is to be timekeeper and traffic cop, because you're in for a real treat. These three gents are going to give you a real sense of part of where our world is going. And as we think of this idea of the pervasive network, I just want to share a couple of opening thoughts and kind of plan in your mind some of the things that you'll get a chance to ask and talk about. Obviously, when you do an event like this, you must have Twitter handles to hand out, as well as a hashtag. And I meant to ask if there is one for the event. If there isn't, why don't we just make one, and the New York Tech Council, I guess,
NY Tech Council
as the Twitter handle. So maybe the hashtag can be NY Tech Council if you want to, if any of you are tweeting, and if you're not, don't worry about it. So what I do is I teach journalism at Columbia, the Graduate School of Journalism, and every time there is an important global event, I waste a lot of time giving interviews to journalists who say, does this mean social media has come of age? Does this mean that Twitter has come of age? And I did 7 interviews in the last 2 days, and I said, what do you mean this time? Egypt wasn't enough, Bahrain wasn't enough, Michael Jackson's death, Haiti, Japan, the Mumbai attacks. How many times can a piece of technology come of age, was my question back to them. And the last 48 hours are just an example of what can happen when there's technology all around you. And this question of the pervasive network, I think, is especially fascinating. What happens at a time when technology, and especially the internet, is available without even thinking about it? So you've certainly heard of things like the internet fridge that will order milk for you. It sounds pretty good. You've heard of the pill box that will call this refill for the prescription. And in fact, that reminds me, I'm almost out of my Lipitor prescription. I have 1 tablet left, and I know that I don't have the internet pill box, so I have to break the tablet in half and then wait for time that I can call in.
We won't get you excited.
Yeah, exactly. That's another part of the, that's the other product from Pfizer, but yes, I'm candidate for that next, as well as Prozac, I guess. But this idea of the pervasive network is very important to think of what it can do. You know the story of the Osama bin Laden, the death, and how that was covered. It turned out that the news was broken first by someone who worked in the previous administration, and people trusted him, and that's what raised the volume of tweets. And then just before President Obama spoke, we had the highest intensity of tweets in the history of Twitter, where they're doing 5,000 tweets per second. And but it turned out that that was not the first time that the news of Obama, of when Obama spoke, was not the first time that this came out. It was when some IT guy who was in the town of Abbottabad was live tweeting it, except he didn't know what he was live tweeting. He was tweeting kind of news in the neighborhood. But because he had the internet, because he had the cell phone, he was able to tweet. And imagine a life when, or a world when you're able to be online all the time and share both good and bad information at any point. What does that do? And that's what I hope we'll answer today. We'll also talk about things like privacy and security and things on the cloud. When everything is online, what are the dangers for everybody here? I consider myself a tech evangelist and a tech skeptic. And I think we'll use that as a construct to kind of have a conversation here. I'll ask some questions, but we'll also give you plenty of time to ask questions as well. I hope you have your introductory sheet with everybody's bio on it, because I don't want to take up time introducing everyone. But let me just tell you who's here with us. We have over on my extreme right, Brian Higgins, who's an executive director at Verizon Wireless. And you can imagine that the Pervasive Network is in the direct interest of Verizon. Telecom folks, the more we're all on the internet, the better it is for them, as I imagine, and you'll maybe correct me. Many would agree. And but what happens to infrastructure issues? We saw with the popularity of the iPhone and the iPad, some of the telecom issues that came up. Can you always access it? And what happens when you raise the expectations of a permanent, connected life that we have? So that's Brian Higgins. Please welcome him. Next, we have in the middle Jason Rosenblum, and Jason's Twitter handle is Jason Rosenblum. For those of you who are following along, he's Director of Emerging and Mobile Products at Dow Jones. He has been there for just a short time, but before that was at places like CNET and Condé Nast. And you can imagine from a media point of view how important this is, because we want to produce content and we want all of you to be consuming it all the time. And that's why he is here. Please welcome Jason. We're joined by F Grossen, Jay as he's known. His Twitter handle is F Grossen, Grossen, for those of you on Twitter. And he's creative director at Frog Design and a fellow professor. He teaches design at the Parsons School of Design. And his focus has been on how you bring technology and consumer products together in a meaningful way for consumers. And this is as important as the other two things we talked about. You could have a great network, you could have great content, but if you don't have a great interaction and a great interface, it's very hard for people to use it and stay connected. So he'll be bringing us that perspective. Please welcome Jay to the panel. So let me start with Brian. If you will share your point of view about the Pervasive Network, and
Sure.
then we'll take it from there.
Yep, not a problem. So, as we pointed out, obviously Verizon has a vested interest in trying to make sure everything is as connected as it possibly can be. So I actually spend the majority of my time both on devices and also the application space. So it's not only just the device, but also the app, and then ultimately the service, and then ultimately the usability of that service is a primary focus. And so, ultimately when you take a look at things, what we're trying to do and connectedness and the availability of networks and capacity, et cetera, the view that we have and the view for really kind of any carrier that's out there is that there are going to be multiple networks that are available that are going to be leveraged at all times. So there are going to be wide area networks that are available from Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint, and there are also going to be local area networks that are available, public areas in the home, and all of these have to be synergized and working across the cloud and everything else we've talked about in order to make sure that you have the ubiquity that people look for as far as overall connectivity. And then from that connectivity, you're going to have access to the applications and ultimately get the usability you need out of whatever services you may have out there. And a lot of it is going to be devices that you're using every single day, so your tablet, your smartphone, what have you. But then ultimately, kind of my goal is trying to get some of the devices that you actually don't hold on to. So the refrigerator we talked about, we joke around about it. I don't think it's that funny, actually, because we spent a lot of time talking about what you can do with refrigerators. After this discussion here, I can walk you through one scenario I think is very realistic for that particular product. But I think machine to machine, also with the personal aspect to it, I think is going to be critical in trying to figure out how do we pull those two worlds together where I have permanent connected devices and individuals that are interacting with those in a meaningful way.
All right, thank you. Jason.
So at Dow Jones and within the media industry, we're looking at the trends that are going on within what we call the pervasive network. So just looking at some of the macro trends, by 2014, There'll be more more devices connected to the mobile web than desktop machines connected to the web. There'll be more smartphone shipments in 2012 than PC shipments. So we're seeing that, according to surveys, people are spending approximately 25% of their waking hours on mobile devices, with people spending 4.5 hours on their iPhones, 2.5 hours on their iPads. So it's just phenomenal growth in the mobile space. And as part of Dow Jones, Director of Mobile, what we're looking at is how to capitalize on all of these new people coming online via smartphone and tablet. So for us, what we're looking at is the challenges of working across multiple different ecosystems. So working across platforms, across Apple's ecosystem, across Android, across the web, the mobile web, tablet-optimized websites. We're also looking at, besides really looking at these new channels, we're trying to look at sort of the bevy of new services that are out there and how we combine them into this pervasive network. So how do we integrate Facebook? How do we integrate Twitter? More than just at a surface level. How do we work with many of the new services that are coming online, Groupon, and what's going to be coming within the next year, the things we don't see in the future. As well as looking at new forms of consumption. So this content is now being consumed in different ways, different hours of the day, right? We're seeing usage in the early morning and late evening that didn't exist before. So how do we cater our content to this audience that's now expanding and growing in different ways? Because now they're not trapped at their desktop. They're not just reading a print newspaper. They have this content with them wherever they go with smartphones and tablet devices.
This idea of the day part, which has always existed in radio and television, now exists online in the social media space. So there's now best practices of when you tweet something. So you think about tweeting restaurants that you're going to, like towards the afternoon when people are thinking about where to eat, as opposed to first thing in the morning. So things like that, I think, are going to be...
When's it appropriate to tweet this stuff?
Exactly. When they're all awake and ready for this, right?
Right.
So now let's go to Jay, who's going to bring us kind of his experience building the usability around this.
Well, it's interesting that we've got the network, we've got the foundation of how people communicate, of where the content travels across and how people start to consume it. And you're going to create more and more and more content. It's a never-ending cycle of you get more and more and more. And how do people really want it? When do people really want this content? That's something that we look at all the time, is like really about those touch points around brands, and how do you simplify and kind of hide the complexities? How do you allow for people to access content anywhere, anytime, when they want it? It's the Netflix thing of being able to start a movie here and get home and you start playing it on your 50-inch plasma screen. And that kind of seamless experience is what people are looking for. They don't care how it's built. They only care when it's not working, right? They only care when it's broken. When I'm in the subway and I can't access the movie, or I can't get the pictures downloaded to my New York Times app, I'm just like, why isn't that cached? That's when people care about the network. They just want it seamless. They just want to not be able to think about it. And I think that's Frog deals with these kind of large, wicked problems of you've got a network, you've got content, you've got a physical product or a physical device. How do you create an ecosystem of clarity and simplicity and fun? How do you make this whole experience fun? One thing it's really interesting that we try to tackle these big issues around mobile health. And think about the pervasive network when it comes to health care. And I can access my Google Health, my Microsoft Health Vault at any time, anywhere. My doctor can access it on his iPad because the doctors are the fastest growing users of iPads in business situations. How do they access? They can access it at any time, but what is the real benefit to me? What is that instant gratification that I get? It's the same with like energy consumption and connected devices in the home and appliances. It's like, yeah, I'm doing it because it's great for the world, and maybe I'm going to save some money, but I need that instant gratification. I think kind of the cool things and the fun things with the Pervasive Network are things like connected anytime music. When Apple has their server farm up and running, where's in Virginia or something, and they'll probably announce it in June, when cloud music is available and I can access all my music anytime, anywhere, except in the subway.
So that's coming, right?
That's good.
Anybody here working on the subway?
Yeah, please.
So there is, they've handed out the contract for that.
But it's those things, and it's like media consumption too, is that it's instantaneous, it's gratifying, it's something I can go, wow, this is a different experience for me. This is new, and it's fun, and it's making my life better. These other things feel like they're bigger issues that it's harder to touch, right?
Well, why don't you talk a little bit about Frog Design and give them examples of things you worked on?
Sure. So Frog's been around for about 42-ish years. Started out as product design, just product design.
Frogs themselves? No.
No
No
frogs.
frogs were harmed
There
in
was
this.
Pet Frog, Friedland, that was in the German office for the longest time. I'm sure there were several Friedlands, but
okay.
Yeah. Came over to the US to work with Steve Jobs on the first iteration of the Mac, and creating really kind of a system of design language system for the Apple Macintosh at that time. And that systems thinking kind of pervades pretty much all the work we do. So it's not just about the object you're designing, but it's about the context and about the people who touch it and about the technologies that support it. And so we kind of, depending on what project is, we're looking at all those factors of how these things are going to benefit people, whether it's benefiting the business, bringing it to market, or benefit the end user. Typically, we try to stay end user advocate on these things, but we know that obviously we're getting paid by a client
Right,
too.
exactly.
Right. One of the ones that most recent projects, it's been a long-term project, or several projects, is with Intel. And it started out as just a showcase of some of their new technology, but has turned into a new division for them around retail and retail signage, digital signage, as well as the whole experience of walking into a Home Depot, seeing an end cap digital signage. Your phone gives you a notification that, hey, welcome to Home Depot, and there's a relationship between what's going on here, what you've purchased online, and a new experience that is happening in the store. Because retail environments are starting to feel the pinch, right? Working with a major business office supply company, they know that people aren't going there for software anymore. They aren't going there necessarily for their stickies anymore. They're getting all that shipped to them. So how do you bring value back into the retail space? And I think the Intel project has been really interesting to see how you bring a new experience, a new connected experience, a new personalized connected experience back into retail. And it's multi-device, it's really thinking about embedded screens and mobile devices that you have in hand. So there's some interesting things of being able to, obviously you need cloud connectivity to have all your information and
Sure.
make it all relevant.
Can you tell me, in a sense, Jason, what is happening at Dow Jones? Give examples of some of the projects you're working on and what the pervasive network will mean for you. Right now, you don't have service in the subways, but you have it everywhere. Most of your customers are business folks, so they have access. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So before this meeting, I
Maybe we'll take all the chairs back because I think we're turning our backs to some of this.
So before we started the meeting, I talked to a couple of folks in the audience, a couple of entrepreneurs, I think a couple of account reps. So I think all of you are probably struggling with sort of similar issues that we have at Dow Jones, even if you're not in the media industry related to this pervasive network. So the great thing is it's an amazing time, right? There hasn't been a time like this in terms of technological boom since the 90s, right? The problem is there's just a wealth of opportunities, and it's hard to know where to go after, how to prioritize certain opportunities versus others. So what we're looking at now with the Wall Street Journal, with Barron's, with Smart Money, and MarketWatch, the properties that make up our digital network, is the typical questions of, how do we pursue a mobile strategy? Do we go for an app strategy where we're building applications for the specific ecosystems like Apple or Android? Or do we look at a more sort of general solution using more standardized technologies like HTML5, mobile web, right? So with those properties now, that's really, we're at the point of where we're early to the game with iPad, and we have a very robust solution that's gotten quite a bit of traction in the market. And trying to evaluate where to take it from here and what will really move the needle beyond the product we have. I think the beauty of what we've done and the success that we've had, I think, is based on the fact that we've created an experience that's much like the paper. So we've almost created a replica. We've removed a lot of what I would call some of the clutter or the noise that is in a typical website and really distilled it down to the experience of reading the front page, like reading the journal. It's a finite experience. So you could go from beginning and end, and you could talk to your peers about that great article you read on the front page of the journal, right? The quirky article that's always below the fold.
Can I ask, how do you make a decision on what that next platform is? If you're trying to stay ahead of it, but yet you're going on numbers of, well, we got to build it for iPad or we have to build it for Android because of the numbers out there. Right. If you're trying to be ahead, it's not necessarily about the numbers, right? So how do you make those?
And the numbers game is, all of you probably have seen, is that it's changing every day. So there's a different report every day that says, tablets, there are going to be 50 million tablets sold in 2011. No, another analyst says 60. And then it just keeps going up and up. And as well, in terms of market share, so there's, there are conflicting reports coming out all the time. And it feels like everyone's guessing about where the market's going to be in a year from now. So we're trying to use our best judgment to figure out what to pursue, but then also how to do it cost efficiently. Because for you guys, especially the entrepreneurs, those of you who are having to spend capital on creating these apps know that trying to go after all these opportunities in the pervasive network is just not, it's not possible with the limited resources that you have, right? So you really need to either bet on a particular ecosystem or go for solutions that are a bit more standardized, like HTML approaches, but maybe that don't have the bells and whistles or don't necessarily have the capabilities yet of some of the native applications.
Jason, can you give an example of something that happens with a journal story on the PC that doesn't happen on a mobile platform, either in the consumption side or in how you display it, how you produce it?
Yeah. So the big thing that we do in the tablet world that we don't on the PC is we allow you to read offline. So Jay's problem about I go into the subway and I can't watch that darn video, well, you can with the WSJ app, because we've been able to solve that problem with the technology that we have. As long as you let it download to your tablet, you have the Wall Street Journal in its full completeness with all the interactive graphics, the pictures, the text that you would want to find. So that's a huge difference between the experience of our tablet platform, our mobile experience, versus our desktop. You can take it with you, and you really can take it with you anywhere, because you get that experience wherever you are once it's downloaded to your iPad.
And that works, is it also true of the iPhone and the Android version, or only on the iPad version?
Right now it's only on the iPad version. We cache a lot of the content for our smartphone readers as well. Yeah.
All right, so let's ask Brian, can you give us, you kind of teased what you were going to say about the fridge and other things, so why don't we pull that out of you and give us some cool things, wow this audience.
Okay, I have to wow the audience. All right, that's a challenge. All right, why don't I tell the fridge story? I'll start with that. So let's start out with something that sounds a little ridiculous. So there's one company we're talking to about refrigerators connectivity and the fact that when you buy a refrigerator, it's pretty much a one-time purchase, right? I'm going to go out, it's a capital purchase, I'm going to buy this item. I may or may not buy refrigerator X later on, 10 years later, whatever it may be. And so the revenue stream for that particular company is fairly disjointed, right? You don't have any kind of stickiness with the customer. So the challenges they have in those kind of industries is how do you create some stickiness? Well, the way to do that is try and make sure it's connected. And connected, you're talking about trying to make sure I'm ordering milk and things like that. That's further out. There are easier things that we can do to try and make sure that the machines that are connected are actually adding value. And so I'll give you a simple example. So this company we're talking to that did an analysis of, folks that deal with the water filtration system that sits in your refrigerator, right? So everybody has the blinking light that comes on. What they found is that roughly 90% of the people that get that blinking light hold down the button for 3 seconds, wait for the blinking light to go away, never buy the water filter.
90%.
Roughly 90%.
Oh my God.
Right?
Wow.
So if you think about the water filter, that's roughly a $50 transaction for a lot of those appliances that are out there. It's also a connection back to the consumer, right? The reason why people don't do it is because I don't know what kind of model I have, I don't know what kind of filter goes in there, I don't know where to go to get the filter, but if you connect the refrigerator, meaning that you have a relationship between that refrigerator and some carrier that's out there, whether it's an AT&T or a Verizon, so you know it's connected. Now all of a sudden you have a device that's sitting there that has intelligence about, I know what the model number is, I know who actually owns this device most likely if they sign the appropriate agreements to actually provide that information. I know what the location is, possibly, again, if I sign up for that as well. What I can do is I could put a little pop-up on a screen in the refrigerator that says, hey, Mr. Higgins, I noticed your water filter is actually almost finished. Would you like to have a replacement? I know you're located at this address. I can ship them out to you, 3 of them, and we'll have it there in 2 days. Yes or no? So all of a sudden, we've eliminated all these barriers to a very simple transaction that most people want to complete and turned it into a binary transaction, right? That's something that's meaningful that actually adds a lot of value to the end customer. And I think that's kind of what the key is for us from a network perspective is it's not about simply connecting everything just for the fun of it. It's really kind of adding value and trying to figure out if you're talking about machine to machine, if you're talking about some of the applications that people access, are people actually getting value out of it for their money? And that's kind of the critical aspect that we focus on.
How far out is that?
So that particular aspect there, if I could do it tomorrow, I would. I think the challenge is less about the technology and more about the business, right? So you got to figure out, so I'm going to connect this device. Now there's a cost associated with connecting it. There's going to be transport as well. Who's going to pay for that transport? Is it going to be the customer? They're certainly not going to pay $60 a month for a connected refrigerator, right? We all know that. But, maybe they pay a couple pennies because the transactions are so small. Or maybe the company that's actually building that refrigerator gets so much value out of the data they're collecting from that device that they pick up the transport. So I think those are some of the more critical factors. It's what I find is it has very little to do with the technology and the challenges there, very much about the business aspects and what do we think the right models are that again add value to the end customer.
So that's one of the things that why coming to an audience like this, where there are some of those decision makers will be not maybe your question, but things like that. So how do you convince an old style corporation to think about these new things? Can you share some insight on that?
Yeah, so I think the big aspect for us is that if you're talking to, again, sticking with something like capital equipment, you have to try and explain to them what some of the value is in being connected, right? So what are the things you haven't thought about in the past? And again, kind of sticking on that similar theme, if you're someone that's in a capital goods market where I'm selling something in a single instance and it's never connected, I don't know where it goes, I don't know who has it, I don't know if it's repaired, if it's thrown in the garbage, whatever it may be. If I connect it, now I've got that intimate link back to the customer. I can figure out how to add some value to that customer, and also I can think about, am I selling capital goods any longer, or am I turning it into a service? Right? So does it matter that I'm buying a one-time transaction, or am I selling a device perhaps at a discount, like a cell phone, a smartphone, or a tablet, and then I'm charging someone for the utilization of that device? Like those are the kinds of scenarios we try and walk people through, and a lot of them, or some of them, I'll say, not a lot of them, but some of them sound pretty peculiar to some of the folks we talk to because they're not thinking about what opens up when it gets connected. But I think those are some of the critical aspects we try and touch on is that, there are certain areas that when you're connected, when you have intelligence, when you're adding value to the end user, you can do a lot more than simply think about the business that you've known for the past 80, 20, whatever, how many years you've been in business. Okay.
Jay, why don't you give us a sense of some of the products you yourself or the company, what are some of the things that worked on that touch upon this idea of a permanently connected world and how that changes. You hinted at music online, for example. Sure. But I also want to tell everybody, if you haven't seen this, there's a tiny side project that somebody at Frog Design pulled together called A World of Tweets. And if you want to get a sense of the power of Twitter and see how pervasive that is and how global it is, you just log in and every time I do a class, I teach a workshop, I start with this. So it just shows you tweets as they're coming in from around the world, and they'll show you it's a truly global thing, and this is just that somebody just did it for fun. So you just Google it or Bing it, since we're in the Microsoft office. But Google is a sponsor, so we're playing both sides here. But definitely Bing it, Google it, and check that out.
So I think that some of the most work, both in Europe and in the U.S., is around mobile health and how the network is connecting all those devices, smart devices within, say, ICU units, where you've got a dozen or so devices that really should be talking to each other, if not talking to a central place that can be collected by the physician, and that data can be then interpreted by the physician. So we're seeing a lot more of where it used to be a standalone device, where then it was a connected device through Ethernet to wireless devices, which are now all talking to each other within single rooms, and being able to take that information out of the room throughout the hospital, even taking that information up into the cloud and over to your primary care place. So a lot of it has to do with looking at that whole experience from the patient point of view of what information is necessary for them at each of the points, whether it's primary care, going into emergency care, or long-term care, and all those connected devices that are starting to happen out there. So, and Welsh Allen is one of the big ones that are really working on it.
Can you give us some, I presume most people in the room are not designers, but this is your world. Can you give some examples of things that a designer worries about that a network, somebody designing the network, someone designing the content doesn't worry as much about? And what are some lessons for the entrepreneurs and others in the room who are trying to deal with this?
Well, I think that, I was talking to somebody else from Verizon here, it's not necessarily about that individual product. It's not the one product that you're designing. It's really considering the context of it and considering all the touch points that are around it, because that's going to affect how you use this and the customer journey around a single product or a single service. And I think that is something that we try to bring to all of the projects, is really looking from the beginning of when I'm interested in getting an iPad, what's driving me through that process, and how's this going to make my life better. So it's really the touch points and making sure that you're considering everything within the experience.
Can you give us some examples of some mistakes that people make when they're dealing with this?
I think it is thinking that, and I love the example of the connected fridge, because actually we're working with probably the same people in Jersey, but
let's find out. Reveal all. They're just friends here.
Just that this idea of that this connection can now create a new relationship, a longer term relationship, to something that was again a one-off purchase, and you have no connection to the consumer again. And I think that is something that you have all this upfront marketing, you have all the point of purchase interaction, you may have a warranty card or something that goes in, or you may have them sign up online, but if you're connected to this thing throughout, then that's going to create this longer-term relationship and longer-term value for the company.
Okay.
And that means that you need to hire different types of people and think a little bit differently about the services that you're providing.
Okay. I'm going to come to the audience in a couple of questions. I have a couple more questions up here. It's great when all this stuff is online or on the mobile space. What about questions of privacy, of when things don't work, when you don't have access to it? The doctor inputs all this information, it doesn't end up in the cloud, doesn't get stored. So how much do you worry about that? And the recent experience of the Amazon outage, what lessons were you affected by that at all? Or over at Dow Jones, were you affected by that? Or?
We weren't. Yeah.
Okay, but can you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, sure. So so for us, we're more of a wall garden, right? So we're within our organization, the data is kept there, and we don't have a lot of dependencies on to the outside vendors. But the general issue of privacy has definitely come up with, besides the Amazon outage, the fact that Google and Apple are storing our location on our iPhones and Android phones, right? So, I think those are pretty relevant issues, given that we have these devices with us all the time, wherever we go. Internally, in terms of privacy, we kind of separate how we, determine who a person is from what device they're using. And for us, there's sort of very clear line of, what we can track and what we can't. But the reality is, there's nothing to prevent you in the mobile space from tying the unique device ID of your phone, of your tablet, to you, right? There's no laws against that right now. And right now,
Congress is looking into it after
Yeah.
what this happened.
And so right now, that's really an open space. So I think we're at the point where we were in the 90s with cookies and tracking cookies, which again has been reopened recently. And as many of you have seen, a lot of the browsers have adopted do not track features. I think Firefox, IE, and maybe
Chrome.
one other, Chrome, yeah, have all added that feature. So I think we're going to see some sort of move in that space, because right now, even though you can't track movement kind of between applications, if companies on the back end were to form networks in the way that we have them today, so actually a company like an AdMob or any of the ad networks, they could technically share information about you and everything they know about you and your device. So I think that is scary for consumers. But the fact is, I think most consumers are just completely unaware.
I think it's too muddy.
Yeah.
I think it's, I think credit card, oh, I got my credit card information.
Yeah.
That hits them home, right?
Yeah.
They know that, and they can do something about that. But use a little bit of my location or a little bit of my profile from Facebook about my likes and dislikes. If it gets me something better and gives me a better product, okay, I'll give that up. So I think it's not quite sure what the privacy actually does mean. I think we make a big deal out of it, but
Yeah.
that's the average consumer.
No, in fact, this is what well, I like to point out that every time consumers are given the choice between convenience and security, they always pick convenience. I mean, you might remember that Yahoo announced that we're going to keep consumer data for 3 months instead of the standard 12 months. And you would have thought then millions of people would switch to Yahoo to do their searches. It turned out it didn't work. So what did they announce the other day? We're going to 18 months. Because they found that that was a better value proposition than trying to sell the consumer on better experience, a more private, secure experience. And if you haven't read this unbelievable series the Journal did called What They Know, you must read it. I mean, it's If you're on the marketing side, you might read it and say, wow, I wish my company was doing more of this stuff. If you're on the other side, you'll say, meaning you're not trying to make money from this, you'll say, oh my God, I didn't know this. In fact, they even tracked what the journal itself tracks. And they were kind of transparent about it. And on that wheel that they made, they showed that. I don't know if you were there when they did that, but it was quite astonishing to see even what the journal tracks. But this is a series, probably 20, 30 articles, and it's absolutely worth looking at online. If you just look for What They Know, I think it's wsj.com/WTK, What They Know, and you'll see it. So let's ask a company that has a lot of data, has a lot of consumer data. First of all, do you feel comfortable at all kind of talking about what happened with Apple, what you know of it? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd also just point out that the good thing that Apple did was Steve Jobs came out the next day and said, it was a mistake, we're going to fix it. How often will companies do that is another thing. But we are, as consumers, we are entrusting to you a lot of stuff. How do you feel about that? What are Verizon's thoughts on these issues?
Right. So I can't comment on Apple just because I'm not intimately familiar. But I mean, I think one of the tricky aspects here is that you have a number of different companies coming together to provide services. So in your scenario, you've got Google and Apple and Verizon and AT&T and other companies that are out there. And I think to your point, there are different expectations depending upon the kind of services that are there. So a Verizon or an AT&T that's going to charge you for the service, you probably expect they're going to be a little more conservative with some of the data that's there. And I think you'd be right. For some of the services that are largely free, perhaps you might think that there may be a little more flexibility relative to some of the data. And again, I think in some instances you would be right as well. But I think in general, what you're going to find is Verizon, again, very conservative in that area. I think you're going to find that with a lot of the carriers that are out there. And I think we're in a learning process, to tell you the truth. I think there are a number of companies out there that are trying to figure out what's the freemium model that we can work with. Is there certain aspects of the data that I can attached to that is okay with consumers, but I'm still providing value to them, or am I not? And so I think we're going to see kind of a push and a pull here relative to what consumers and end customers think is reasonable and what is not. So I think we're probably just in the starting stages of trying to figure out, where all the players are going to play, what a free player is allowed to access, what someone that's actually charging the service is allowed to access, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I think beginning stages.
Okay. Why don't we open it up to some questions from the floor? Please tell us who you are, and tell us if it's directed to one person. Others will have all three answer. Yes.
My name is Richard Cooper. A general question. Does anybody care to comment on the divide between the younger consumer and the older consumer regarding privacy and all the other things?
Okay. Good question. And who'd like to start off? As somebody who deals with the young people at Columbia, I have some thoughts, but we'll get you go first.
The funny thing is our audience is only the older consumer. The average age of a WSJ reader is about 55.
And Barron's is older.
Barron's is older. Yeah. So we don't get a lot of feedback from the younger consumers. Our younger consumers are in the 40s.
Kids.
Yeah. But in terms of just sort of a general answer to the question is that overall, it seems like the industry is self-regulating. I was at a DMA conference maybe 2 years ago, and hearing marketers speak about this, and a representative from the DMA itself was saying, "Hey, it's not right that you need a master's degree to understand how the heck privacy works within your browser, right? Most people just don't get it, and same for the mobile space." So the fact is, I think the industry has been wise in self-regulating, and I think the recent moves in terms of adding these do not track features to browsers is a good first step to avoid the government stepping in and actually creating regulation around privacy.
Okay. Anybody else want to? Do you find with your younger users?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, so just, my opinion and observations. I mean, obviously I think the younger generation has a tendency to try and be a little more open, provide more information. I'm probably somewhere in the middle, where I'll be slightly open, but also slightly closed. And then folks that are a little older than me, as you would expect, tend to be a little more reserved. And I think, that's to be expected. And again, I think it kind of comes down to, I don't want to call it a generational thing, but folks that are, younger kids that are growing up with a lot of free access to a lot of tremendous information and tremendous applications that are out there, that think it's okay today to try and provide some of that information. Again, I think we're going to see whether or not that trend is going to continue, or whether or not there's going to be a feeling later on where they say, you know what, I need to draw a line somewhere, and we're going to figure out as a society where that correct line is going to be. But I think, the expectations that I'm sure the audience has of, younger generation is going to be a little more open, older generation is going to be a little more closed, is largely accurate with what, we see.
Jay, what do you think?
Well, I'm just thinking that you got to work a little bit harder to prove value, maybe with an older audience. That if I'm going to give up my information, I better get something pretty good in return.
Yep.
Whereas I think as a younger audience, again, like you said, it's they're just so used to, oh yeah, I'll give out my email address. No problem. It just seems like a natural thing in order to get this app or get this little piece of content or something. No problem. So you're right. Lines will be drawn. Is it around your kids? Is it around your pets? Is it what in medical records? When does it become not okay to give that information out?
Okay. Some more questions? Yes.
I read the Wall Street Journal.
Hi, tell us who you are. Tell us who you are, please.
Betty Jarina, Assistant Chair of Computer Science at the university. I read the Wall Street Journal every day, and I won't tell you my age. I find it very interesting for my students, because there's so much about technology companies and all the different facets of the way they operate. I find it interesting that there's so much information about technology firms in the Wall Street Journal for my computer science students. They're not just programmers. They have to understand the way these companies operate.
Sure.
I think there was a time in which I 3 articles a day about Google and Wall Street Journal. But Google...
Now all the stories about Facebook and Groupon.
Just constant. So anyway, there was a recent article about the location, their ability to locate people through their applications. And they mentioned that it wasn't their intention to track people. It's the efficacy of their applications that's tied into their ability to locate people. So can you comment on that?
I can only speculate. We were talking about this at the office when the news broke, and personally I believe it was just some shortcut that was put in there by engineers who weren't necessarily thinking about the ramifications of tracking location. They were probably using it as a shortcut. I don't think it was malicious in any way. I don't think Apple is sitting, or Google, or any of the platform providers are really looking to know exactly where we are at any given point in time. My thought is it was just, in some ways, an error or a shortcut to make applications more effective.
But I'd like to know, in what way does the not the intentional tracking, but the tracking of people's location tie into the efficacy of this?
Well, for those of you who didn't follow the story, Jobs said that the reason they did this was so they would know where the nearest cell towers and so that they could triangulate, and so you'd get fast. So that if they knew if you were back in the same spot you had been 2 weeks ago, then you'd get a faster signal and you'd locate. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the efficacy part. The problem was that you don't tell people they're doing that. So some people might say, I will happily give up that information if I get faster service. And at the same time drop $5 from the monthly fee. And there may be times when a network says, if there are people who are doing high consumption, we'll give them a break. But we don't know exactly where that's going. And that's sort of a question for Brian. How much do you think about pricing models in this pervasive network? And what are some things you can share, you're comfortable sharing about pricing? Because that's what they learned with the iPad, right? That consumption's so high that they're forcing all the prices to be raised.
Yeah, so I mean, pricing is a constant discussion because it costs money to send a bit or a byte. There's no question about that. And when you think about all the data that comes across, whether it's content from newspapers or what have you, we also think about a Netflix, a Blockbuster. You think about high definition video. You think about 3D video, so dual 1080p streams coming down to a device. That's a massive amount of data, and so we need to. we keep talking about value, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I mean, you have to figure out that I know as a customer, someone's not going to pay $1,000 a month for their smartphone bill, right? I know that. But I also know that they probably want to watch a lot of movies on their iPad or their smartphone, but you've got to figure out, where's the right balance there? When does it make sense to make sure that people understand that, for a 3D movie, you're probably better off with a Fios connection, as opposed to taking the iPad in your car and trying to watch that, from here over to Chicago with
while
the kids.
Driving.
Yeah, exactly, while driving. So, again, it's a constant, we look at, how do we try and deliver as much as we possibly can, and again, strike that happy medium between, what people may want in a crazy scenario and what they probably realistically need, and also what we think they're willing to pay for that kind of service. So, it's a constant thought process for us.
One thing, to just go back to his question about young people, there was a time when people spent all their time trying to get off marketers' lists, but in the social media world, which is what I know, there are services where people gladly announce where they are, hoping to get discounts, they're telling marketers, sell me stuff, give me stuff. So it's the exact opposite of what, as a TV reporter, technology reporter, I used to spend time telling people how to get off these things. Now, if you've seen this thing called Facebook Sponsored Stories, has anybody seen this? Sponsored Stories, it's called. And what happens is, you like Starbucks, let's say, or Verizon, then Verizon can serve up an ad, Facebook does this, to people who know you well, saying you like Verizon or you like Starbucks. And I think people wouldn't mind it if they got a cut of that ad. They don't get that right now. But that's the world we're living in, where younger people, by definition, but others as well, are saying this is where we are. And you may have heard this, that Mark Zuckerberg said in the fall of 2009, privacy is no longer the social norm. When he says that, it actually means something, because he has the power to do something about it. And that's the world. So I think that gives you a sense of where we're headed in the long term. Yes?
Yeah, hi, Ed Martino. The question I have is around pervasive applications, machine to machine, or mobile web, whatever. This is more on the implementation side. When you look at, for instance, Jason, when you look at bringing on a new application, as you mentioned, it's got to be fast, you got to move, real quick, in a competitive marketplace. Do you see any change up now from whether you build it in-house, you move it out to the cloud, the different platforms, security, how do you, get all those gearbox underneath all this to work fast, so that on the business side, you meet the timing of the, business opportunity to launch your application?
So you're saying what kind of product development processes do we use?
Or how much are you doing in-house? How much are you outsourcing?
What I'm wondering
off the shelf?
Of course,
yeah.
you know, these applications are coming on very fast, and even something as simple as that refrigerator application, you know, or yours change up with moving from, you know, a device or a desktop to the iPad. You've got to do a lot of change-ups on security, a lot of change-ups on communications, on integration with other applications. And now you have this whole cloud services, and a lot, you know, just in the next couple of years, more and more volumes of data centers are moving that way. I was just wondering if you see the impact on your pervasive applications, if so, how so?
So, you know, I think what we've done that's helped quite a bit is we've sort of overinvested in our QA resources, and we've created a pretty fluid pipeline of development resources by partnering with an outsourced firm. So we do some of it in-house, and that's where our sort of architecture and design sits, and then a lot of the implementation happens both in-house and in India. So that way we can scale fairly fluidly, but overall I think there's just a huge problem in this market, which is incredible demand and not enough supply of engineers who know how to write this type of code. So, you know, on one hand, in terms of product development, we're able to move fairly quickly on the implementation side because you know, we have the resources in place, and then we also have sort of a product development internal process with product managers, creative resources, marketing, you know, tech leads, QA, all that whole sort of system kind of built out and working so that we could churn releases out fairly quickly. And that's taken, I think, a while to develop internally. And you know, so that begins to answer your question.
Jay, thank you. Jay, can you talk a little bit about this? Do you find this issue of not enough engineers to do this kind of work?
Well, we just added 1,000 engineers to Frog as of last month. So,
so
we were, you know, because we're KKR held company, we've Aerosint and Frog were kind of partners.
Okay.
And we never really did much. Every once in a while we had a product where we need to go to market and we need to build out, you know, a really robust back end. But now we have identified 1,000 engineers and really focus on mobile. Now they're part of the Frog mix. So now we've got resources if we need to build something out or even test something. Like we've got all the test platforms, all the environments that we could test out. But yeah, luckily we mostly build out in Android these days. That seems to be most of our clients are building things, whether it's embedded screens in cars or whether it's tablet applications. Android seems to be the way to go. So we're slowly building up and finding all the people that can build in that open platform, which is a lot easier.
Just to give you a sense about these cloud numbers they're talking about, there were 50 million files on the internet at one point, on the cloud at one point, and the stat I read is that in 3 years it hit 100 billion files. So from 50 million to 100 billion as people got more comfortable on things like Google Docs to all the online services, and that gives you a sense of how quickly this happens. Yeah.
I'm Andrew Brust. I have a company called Blue Badge Insights, and I do analyst and strategy work around Microsoft. I'm also a NITech advisor. You earlier broached and just now touched even closer on the platform question. The fact that you're using Android as a default is really interesting. But let's just recognize that there is some fragmentation out there. Absolutely. And if the people who are hosting us have their way, there will be even more. So the question is then really about HTML5 versus native, and to be real explicit, how viable do you see? And I guess this is for the two of you. I think Verizon Wireless is probably pretty agnostic about this.
We'll take either.
As long as the device handles it, they're cool. But how viable is HTML5 just in general, and as a way to help companies get through the economics?
I'll say that we're kind of perpetuating the rumor of Flash being dead or dying. Because we're building more and more things in HTML5 because it has to be across.
So it's a self-fulfilling kind of thing.
But not just versus Flash and Rhea though, versus native, versus iOS and Android.
Yep. So we're putting web wrappers around things in the browser, and a lot of what we're developing, whether it's on mobile, tablet, is in HTML5. And that's across the 13 offices that we have. Multiple products, more and more. Sorry, more and more that we're finding HTML5 is what we're recommending to do.
And how about John?
So I right now I personally have the complete opposite approach because where we are right in this moment, Apple is dominating the tablet space. Android has failed to pick up steam, but we know that they're going to get there. And then to reach the rest of the market, to reach the majority of the market between Apple, Android, and then some mix of like RIM Playbook or RIM whatever their QNX system, Windows 7, Windows 8.
Or likely 8.
Yeah, HP. So we know the future is going to be very fragmented, but right now there's really only 2 major ecosystems. So if you have the resources to be able to build native for both is a significant advantage, because we just finished a project where we did web, Android tablet, and iPad all in HTML5, and it hasn't launched yet. But the results are good, but there seem to be some fundamental issues, especially on the iPad, with performance and just speed, and the fact that we don't get sort of the whiz-bang features, the UI components that you get from the native environment. Yeah. And one more thing I'll say is, as an independent developer, so doing some work on my own, not having those native UI components built in for me makes life much, much more challenging, because then I need a designer. And to be able to work without a designer then makes me a one-man shop. Which is good for a one-man shop. Right.
Remember, he's a guy with 1,000 engineers, so you might want to be nice to him. Nice to him. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Dick Reisman. Following up on that, it seems to me there's a deeper advantage to going native, which is you don't have to download apps, and you don't. I mean, it seems like it's totally impractical over time to have a million apps for everything you want to do, and page through screen after screen of apps. Unlike on the web, where you can just go to a website, with a list of links. So isn't that almost forcing, ultimately, that the app model is going to die, except for very specialized cases? How can you make it feasible on scale? Okay.
I mean, I do agree that there's a limited attention span for just tons and tons of small single-use apps. I mean, the strategy that I've been talking about at Dow Jones is just one of focusing on our core properties, building those out, making those the best experiences possible. Because I think people will come to an app for the journal or for Barron's or for Smart Money, because we can offer a lot through that app, not just a single-use experience.
By the way, if you haven't been following it, an analyst has just shown that in July, the Apple Store, the Apple App Store will be the same number as Android apps in July, because the way the growth has been. So I was stunned by that. I thought it would be next year. They're predicting that it'll be in July that Android will catch up or surpass the Apple Store in number of apps. So that was news to me when I read that. So. But I read it on the internet, so it must be true.
Hi, my name's Georgetta Asham, and my company is Direct Effects. I have a question for the designer and perhaps the other people about designing for different populations in different environments. I mean, we've had success with Apple. It's had a fairly young market. What are the design issues now that you're going to be in medical settings or working with patients, or support, or also the whole issue of usability for differently abled people?
Well, if you talk about generational, obviously this is a quick adoption for anybody 2 and up, right? We've seen it a lot where gaming, if you go on the subway, you watch little kids adopt this gesture, right? I haven't seen a lot of studies on 16 up. When dexterity goes down, what happens to this new tablet market for them? I would assume that there's a lot of challenges when it comes to the granularity and the motions that we come to expect now that everyone is moving towards this kind of intimate solution for consuming content. It is a huge consideration. Looking at You know, when someone comes and says, "Hey, let's design a new Wall Street Journal application," we have to look at that core market and make sure that we're hitting that square on and that they can do all the things that you can do on here. But we have to look broader and say, this is an aging population. What are the considerations? How do you create an interface that is doing something very simple, like really using kind of like baseline gestures? So you have to kind of simplify. It always comes down to kind of simplification and keeping it really streamlined. And then it becomes more universal, I think.
Brian, can I get you back to a point earlier? You were talking about the refrigerator,
yep.
But you were hinting that there were other things, and we kind of moved on. Can you talk about some of the other things, either you know, immediate or long term?
You know, I'll talk about one that is of particular interest to me, and it again gets back to machine. So it's not a particular device, but so there's a company we work with. They actually built a product that's called the Social Web of Things, which again gets to machine. And the interesting thing about this that really kind of resonated with me is that if you think about it, we're talking about usability, right? And if I think about my home network now, I've got IP cameras, I've got my Sonos system, I've got all these things out there that have IP addresses that are on there. I only know them, my wife doesn't know it, my kids certainly don't understand it at all. And it's really not the correct way to interact with the devices that are out there if you want to have a meaningful relationship with the things that are around you. So this particular company is working on a prototype, the concept that, again, allows you to actually interface with those devices much like you would do with Facebook. So the concept is, and you know, we've got some working prototypes on this that the company pulled together, is that you would essentially become a friend with your car and with your refrigerator and with, and it's really, actually, we've seen the whole interface and everything else, and it works really well. I mean, it's an interesting concept where you'd say, you know, the car comes home and the car needs an oil change, and it says, you know, hey Brian, just want to let you know I'm not feeling that hot right now. I think I need to go in for a 30,000 mile checkup. Do you want me to go ahead and schedule that, yes or no? And you can do that with all the products that are out there, whether you're talking about, you know, your cameras, digital cameras that are there that will say, hey, I've got some photos sitting here for the past couple of months. You want me to throw them up in the cloud, yes or no? Yes, I do, Mr. Camera, that'd be great. You know, send them over to my mom. You already know who she is because she's your friend too. Right, so all those things I think are really meaningful. And so that's a little further out, but you know, those are the kinds of concepts that we're taking a look at when we start thinking about connecting all these devices. And I think the critical theme here, and part of the reason why, you know, we at Verizon get so excited, is that it's kind of really about the simplicity. So if you think about that kind of an interaction, it's really fundamentally focused on a simplistic interaction with complicated devices that are out there. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do on the Verizon side too, from a connectivity standpoint, meaning that if I can embed a wireless connection into that device and you just kind of press the power button, you're connected. You don't have to worry about, do I have Wi-Fi where I need it? Do I know how to actually connect it in? You know, does my mother know anything about Wi-Fi? Her device goes down. Do I need to fly down to Georgia to actually correct that? Do I not? You know, all those things go away if you can very simply connect the device to a wide area network and create the right kind of interfaces. So those are some interesting things we're taking a look at right now.
And that's what this Application Innovation Center that you are part of, or you run this at in Verizon?
Yeah, we actually have, it's a great collaboration location. So we have one up in Waltham, Massachusetts. It's focused on fundamentally devices. So we build devices there, next generation devices there. And then in San Francisco, we have an App Innovation Center that focuses on applications, and they both work together. But
can we get a tour for the Tech Council?
We can talk about it. We can talk about it.
Don, get on that.
Yeah, I know. The great thing is it's a facility. It's not about Verizon engineers. There are certainly plenty of them that are there, but it's really about the other companies that are coming in to innovate. So it's really just kind of an open sandbox for people to develop new products and services.
Okay, we'll do a few more questions in the back. There's a lightning round, short question, short answer.
Sorry.
Okay. So I like the vision, because one thing that constantly bothers me. Let's say that they have an AT&T device, but Verizon has a network, or maybe Microsoft has a Wi-Fi network here. Why do I have to think about it? Why doesn't it just connect to the best provider of connectivity without being locked in and having essentially a situation where we need simultaneous connectivity for every provider?
Right.
Why don't devices just figure out and connect to whomever, rather than trying to have multiple incompatible network infrastructures all over the place?
Because Brian's kids have to eat, right?
Okay, right, exactly. I'll give you a very practical answer. So the device you buy today, $200, you know, whatever the device cost is designed to run on certain modulation schemes, certain technologies, on certain frequencies that are out there. If someone were actually technically able to create a device that would run on every single technology that's out there, every possible frequency that's out there as well, first of all, it can't be built today. Right? So I can't get every single technology in there for every possible frequency that's out there across the entire globe. And if I could build it in there, it'd probably be, I don't know, a $500 device, a $1,000 device, something that people would not buy. right? So I think ultimately what you're going to see is as we progress with a lot of the technologies that are out there is that there was a lot of diversity in some of the connectivity options that you had. I think a lot of that is coming together on some, I'll say, largely similar technologies. You may have heard of something called 4G LTE. So LTE is a long-term strategy that we have for wide area network connectivity. I think your problem will be largely solved, I'd say, next 3 to 5 years for wide area network connectivity. The next question you have is about Wi-Fi, and that really kind of gets into, I've got all these different Wi-Fi providers that are out there. I need to make sure I trust all of them, right? I need to make sure I've got some sort of roaming arrangement with each one of those, and that's more of a business challenge, right? So I think I can't give you a direct answer on how long that would take because business could take a day or it could take 100 years, right? So, but that's, I mean, really right now the big fundamental issue is you've got a technology challenge with a single device that can do everything everywhere.
2 more questions.
Yeah, Nitin, Kapila, a quick question. A lot of the examples have been Facebook, Twitter, business to consumer. How about LinkedIn and the business to business social web? Business to business, even the first generation of the web was 3 to 5 years behind. But there should be a lot of entrepreneurial opportunity, 100 million on LinkedIn, 10 million of which kind of India, a bunch of other countries. So any perspectives or examples and business to business?
Well, I mean, part of what you do is business to business,
Yes.
right? So, but do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so in the context of this pervasive web, so, you know, I don't see why there wouldn't be opportunities in the B2B space. I think that we're seeing some interesting innovations over the last couple of years. I think Jay and I were talking about Bump earlier, which is a great example. Companies like Salesforce are expanding so that their sales reps can now have mobility by accessing via the smartphone and tablet. And a lot of companies are starting to deploy internal applications or, you know, sort of vendor applications through the tablet within the enterprise itself because they're comfortable enough with the security levels that are provided there. So I don't know if that completely answers the question, but I mean, that's what I'm seeing right now.
We're looking at, especially in Frog, we're using, you know, the Google tool sets. We're using Basecamp for project management. So these hosted environments to do a lot of our heavy lifting, a lot of our work. And so, and those include social components in it for all of our offices to start sharing information and sharing insights. So I think that is happening, and it's getting a lot easier and expected from our employees, our younger employees coming in, that they're not going to a server, they're not going to something that's on their desktop, but they're going to a browser and they're going to go get their files, or they're going to start interacting with someone in Germany. So I think that there's just a different expectation of where things are sitting, and then they can get them anywhere.
Okay, question here.
Question for Sree.
Oh.
We're talking about connectivity. What about this connectivity? I looked at your Twitter feed. You have this silent Sree. What's that about?
So my students put together this thing called Silent Sree Day on Thursday, and they will, if they get 200 people to pay $1 each, they will. I will stay off the internet of Facebook and Twitter for that day, and so you can all contribute if you like. But this is the opposite of what the celebrities did on World AIDS Day. Did you hear about this digital death campaign where celebrities said, you know, Kim Kardashian and stuff said, unless you pay $1 million, I will not tweet. What happened? People didn't pay because they didn't want them to tweet. So this is the opposite. If you pay $1, if enough people pay $1, I will not tweet. So it's the opposite of what they were doing, which was the so this is to pay to keep me off. But this is just what I learned from this. Then there's all the students' idea is that trying to engage people is hard, and you want to find not gimmicks but things that touch people. And you say, "God, that's Sree. He talks too much on Facebook. Let me dial him down. But let me help Japan or raise scholarship money, things like that." We had one more question there, and then I'm going to ask each of you for final thought and anything you want to takeaways for these folks. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on sort of the, by the way, my name is Christopher Corral, I guess I'm an engineer. What are your thoughts on the sort of the international market? In other words, here, you know, we have Wi-Fi and large bandwidth for almost anything, almost everywhere right now. But, you know, places like Brazil, India, China, whatever, they have a large population,
Sure.
maybe have a lot of needs, but
Okay.
How would you respond to that?
Sure. Why don't maybe each of you tackle that international question, and then a final thought from each of you. So,
Okay.
Ryan, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So I think, if you're talking about challenges internationally relative to bandwidth, I think quite honestly, much like you had with circuit switch, voice calls and whatnot, I honestly think that the solution is going to be wide area networks. Right? Take a look at China and what they're doing. I talked about this technology called LTE. They're heavily focused on that. So I think freeing up spectrum in certain countries and offering up wider bandwidths and offering wide area networks where people are connected, not having to worry about infrastructure that may or may not be up to spec, is probably going to be the easiest solution to try and get them the kind of bandwidth that they may expect in some of those areas, especially in rural areas.
Okay, so you're saying like wireless everywhere? Like everywhere?
That's fine.
He always thought that when he was young, this is what he wanted to do. This was his dream.
Exactly.
Yeah. A final thought?
I get just in general, I tell you that the folks that I work with, we spend a great deal of time thinking about trying to get the very obvious things connected, tablets and things like that, trying to change user experience, and I'd say also the fairly ridiculous things by today's terms connected as well. And for folks that are in the room, I think probably the biggest challenge that we have and we're actively working on right now is how to try and not just simply get those things connected, but figure out what's the business around it. And again, we keep talking about it, but how do we create mutual value for the end customers? So I mean, that's really kind of the fundamental focus for us when we think about pervasiveness and connectedness, is really trying to figure out, yes, it's connected, but so what? There's got to be some so what aspect to it, and that's really the value aspect. So if you're thinking about those aspects, the carriers like Verizon certainly like to hear the ideas, because that's something we're focused on as well.
Ryan, when I was asking for Twitter handles, you said something like "heck no." Is there a reason? You're just, is privacy or too busy?
No, it's
or
not. Honestly, I just have so much information coming in. I don't, one less channel for me is fine.
All right.
So.
Brian Higgins, everybody, give him a hand. Jason, the international question, and then final thought.
Yep. So coming from a content company on the international side, we do cater to international audiences. For us, we're looking at how to serve customers in a way that they could purchase our content more easily, so remove some of those obstacles. Examples might be integrating with a carrier billing system, or using just sort of creative methods of sort of non-credit card type billing. So that's really primarily in terms of this conversation what we're looking at, as well as just sort of catering the content towards that specific audience. In terms of thoughts to leave you with, I'd say that this is a very interesting, very challenging time, I think, for many of us, and I'd urge you to, if you're not taking advantage of the sort of pervasiveness, or let me say these new channels, I think that there could be a case for your business to start pursuing them, and but I would invest very wisely and definitely think of the business case, the economics of how to move forward with it.
Okay, that's Jason Rosenblum, everybody. And you can see his thoughts at Jason Rosenblum on Twitter.
Nice.
Okay, Jay.
So when I think of emerging markets and how to start thinking about how to get all this great content and eventually getting all this rich media to them, you have to think about where they are today. We work a lot out of Africa and looking at it with MTN and SMS.
Yeah.
SMS is where it's at, man. Boy, they just embrace it, and the magic that they do with leapfrogging connected. There's no wires, and they've got towers, and the way their behaviors have changed, and the way they really leverage SMS in order to not just communicate, but to really do commerce and really build community is really amazing. And to learn from that and say, okay, what's going to happen in 10 years when maybe smartphones or the Nokia 1100 isn't the thing that everyone's holding in their hand, but they actually do have something that can bring down a bit more content, a bit more rich experience. What do you do then? So really, I think watching that population is going to help us with worldwide. That's a lot of what Frog has done.
Great.
So final thoughts is like that underserved market isn't being hit right now with this pervasive network. I feel like there's still this digital divide. The people are taking advantage of all this connectivity. It's still me, right? I got all the devices. I'm going to buy the refrigerator. I'm going to have all that stuff. But what about the people who can't afford that stuff? what people who can't afford the data plan and are still, you say, well, everyone's getting iPhones at $49 or whatever, and that's slowly going up. But I walk into an HRA center here in New York City, 29 of them here in New York City, Human Resource Administration buildings. You got 50 people that are waiting for food stamps with flip phones. And there's opportunity there. And sure, they'll have a smartphone soon, but how else are you going to serve them with this pervasive network and how you're connecting these things? So you got to think of not just me and you with all these great gadgets, but this underserved market.
Great. F Grossen. And his Twitter handle is very easy. It's F Grossen. A couple of final thoughts. We didn't talk about an example that you wouldn't expect of privacy issue that comes up from the pervasive network, and that's the the hack attacks that happened against Sony this week, right? So your kid has a PlayStation, and you promised him or her that you'd get some downloaded games, you put in your credit card, you never thought about it again, but that's been hacked. And that was the first round of hack, and then the second thing, it was even more. And these are the questions that you have to think about. In terms of international, Tom Friedman had this great line, and again, it doesn't reflect on any cell phone provider in this room right now, but he said, I have a dream that one day my cell phone service will be as good as it is in Ghana. And that was just the idea that people there use technology in a completely different way. I saw a friend of mine from India, when he orders in a restaurant, as soon as he pays signs his credit card, he gets an SMS with the record of the purchase. I have, on the other hand, have no idea what I just bought, what tip I put, and then I have to go and reconcile either online or on paper. But now he has that record that we don't have very easily. So, I mean, it isn't always America where some of the smarter uses of the technology. We have better technology, but not necessarily how it's used. And finally, our friend who's doing the videotaping, will you show them the camera you were holding up earlier for the?
No, I put it away.
Oh, he put it away. But he was using the flip camera, and the story of the flip camera is a lesson for everybody in this room. The flip camera, how many of you know what that is, right? Many of you do. It cornered it became the world's #1 point-and-shoot camcorder, and has done so well, and got bought for $570 million by Cisco, and then they shut it down. And the reason they shut it down is that people say, well, we have a one device to do everything. But I believe that was a mistake. They should have tried to sell it, because there's still a lot of people like you're talking about. I know people who use a flip camera because they can't afford the iPhone to shoot the video, right? And they did that.
I actually I was reading that it's not just because they want to do something all in one. It was because they only wanted the technology. They didn't want the camera. They were trying to be streamlined.
Oh, so you're talking about their reasons for, but I think they were deciding to go become a consumer company, and then they didn't. But the interesting thing for everybody in this room was that I had been the first person to cover on TV the original flip, and I said this is going to be huge, which it was, but a week before they shut down the entire company, they sent us a press release for the next generation. And the next generation was the Wi-Fi flip camera, where you shot video and you were able to upload. And imagine what that would have done for the use of it, and a lot of people would have wanted to use that. But this is the lesson where what a big corporation wants is not necessarily what an entrepreneur wants, not necessarily what a consumer wants. And that's this new world we're living in, and trying to figure all of that, partly by going to events like this. I mean, this is really great. Let's give our panel a big round of applause. You're welcome. I just want to leave you got this wonderful set of events that NY Tech Council is doing, and I want to just make an invitation to all of you. At the journalism school, we do dozens of wonderful free events throughout the year, mostly free, but some paid. But we're doing a social media weekend next weekend, not this weekend, Friday night through Sunday afternoon. If anybody's interested, I'd be happy to send you information. You can find it here or email me. And we should all be learning together, and I hope you will keep learning. Thanks, everybody.
This is on Facebook?
No, it's real. Real life.
IRL. Leave your badges on the way out, and if you'd like to join us at Rosie O'Grady's 1 block away afterwards, please feel free to do so. Thanks.